Kath and I have been producing this show for about 15 years. And to be honest, there are many times I think to myself, it would be so much easier for me if Kath would just wear a poncho. I mean, just wear an Afghan, something.
For crying out loud.
I mean, what the heck?
Show some modesty in the Word FM studio.
Right. Tyler Huckabee is with us. Tyler is Relevant Magazine's senior editor, and he's written a piece at Relevant called Don't Blame Your Lack of Self-Control on What She's Wearing, which is an extension in many ways this modesty conversation that's been going on now for a month or so. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so Tyler, this is something that's circling all around social media now. People who are inside Christian ministries, Christian organizations, churches, or just the subculture in general are talking about. So what do we mean by modesty? And why is it that the women seem to pay the price for the fact that men can't control themselves?
Yeah, and it does seem like this is a conversation that, I don't know, I'm 36 years old, and I'd say I hear about once a year, especially in the summer months when it starts getting warm again. This conversation seems to start creeping back up, and there have been a few reasons for it this particular time. And usually I kind of stay out of it because, you know, I'm a guy, and it feels not really my place to weigh in. Exactly, but it seemed like sometime this time there were a few things this time that I specifically wanted to address to kind of my fellow guys who waded into this conversation with some thoughts that I hopefully might be sort of helpful and at least steer the conversation in a helpful direction instead of in an unhelpful one.
Yeah, well, I think it is a helpful conversation. Just as a reminder, hey guys, so the Matthew West song,
Modest is Hottest.
Yeah, that came up, and that was a whole other story. But now on the heels of the Olympics.
Okay, so explain the Modest is Hottest story for people who don't know.
Tyler, you do that. You describe that.
Okay, so Matthew West is a singer-songwriter in the contemporary Christian music industry, and he seems like a very nice guy, and I'm not saying any of this to besmirch his, I don't know him, but I'm sure he's very friendly. And he created this music video called Modest is Hottest. It was sort of a jokey, tongue-in-cheek ode to how he wishes that his daughters would dress more modestly in his language or wear more clothes.
And kind of a family thing, right? I mean, his wife and kids are in it.
And I want to give him
in the video.
I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, Tyler, like you are. I think he had good intentions in doing it.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was jokey, and his family appeared in the video.
It didn't become jokey about 5 minutes after he released it.
It tripped a lot of wires. It hit a lot of people, understandably so, in ways that he did not intend, and touched some really live wires and some live nerves. And he, I think, to his credit, ended up pulling the song and sort of apologizing for it, which is not necessarily something that people do a lot of on the internet. So I tip of the cap to him for recognizing that this conversation was going in a way he didn't intend. But it did kick off this whole another round of the modesty debate, particularly on Christian areas of social media.
Yeah. Okay, so you were talking about the Olympics, John.
Okay, so look at the Olympics now, right?
Beach volleyball?
Beach volleyball. Women are wearing these super skimpy little bottoms. The guys are wearing gym shorts.
Right, exactly.
Women's gymnastics,
finally,
the women...
It was the Polish team who finally said, you know what is wrong with you people?
Right, okay, and so look at women's gymnastics. The German team, they're wearing, tights. Mm-hmm. I got no problem with that. There is some sort of a sexuality overtone to women in the Olympics. I don't think you can deny that, yeah?
Well, I absolutely don't deny that, and I think it's important. I think it's really cool that the Norway team had the wherewithal to stand up for themselves, and that their team backed them up on that.
That was the Norway team. Wait, I gave credit to the Polish team.
That's all right.
I'm always looking to give my countrymen a hands up.
All those, one of those European countries over there, and I believe it was the Norway team. Stood up, and I think that's really cool, and that's really important. Yeah. The article that I wrote is sort of separate from the issue of women having the right and being empowered to make the decisions about what they dress like and what they want to wear when they compete in the Olympics. And I really wanted to focus on what men's responsibility was, and I don't think that men's responsibility in this case is trying to enforce some sort of dress code that's perfectly attuned to their own thoughts and desires for every woman in their life, and certainly every woman who comes into their line of sight throughout the rest of their lives.
Right. And so, Tyler, you talk about Matthew 5, right? I mean, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. It's not the woman's responsibility. You don't gouge the woman's eye out. The guys, take responsibility for your own eyeballs.
Yeah, and that's what I think, that there is so much room here for men to use any sort of dangerous thoughts they think they're having or any dark impulses in their brains, to see that not as a problem for the women in their lives and not as another opportunity for them to sort of try to spread more control around that they don't really have in their lives, and instead try to ask themselves, okay, what does this say about me? What does it say about my heart? What does it say about the way that I view women in general, and how can I check that, make sure that my heart is right? And if you solve that inner problem, that root problem of the way you're thinking about women or about sexuality in general, then that, I think, will solve a lot of the symptoms, the outer manifestation of those issues, which have to do with things like objectifying impulses or viewing women as sex objects because of what they're wearing.
Right. We're talking with Tyler Huckabee. He is a senior editor at Relevant Magazine. He wrote a piece, Don't Blame Your Lack of Self-Control on What She's Wearing. And Tyler, I'm sure people who are not believers and are not part of, a Christian subculture listening to this conversation might think, oh, how quaint that they're talking about this.
Or they think they are so tight. Like,
but the fact of the matter is, we saw this, that, 3 of the top 10 internet sites in the world are porn sites. And, those are billions of clicks every day. So the country itself, the world itself is awash in lust and pornography. And we're talking about covering up modestly and guys taking control of their own eyeballs.
Yeah, and I think that there is room for overlap here, whether or not you come at this conversation from a Christian worldview. I think we can all agree that treating women with respect and then treating women with respect is important, that men humanizing the women in their life even more is important. And I think one way to do that when you're a man is to take control of that thought life, and that's something that transcends just the biblical worldview. We all want more of that. What I'm suggesting in here is that doesn't start with, for men, that doesn't start with telling women how to dress. It starts with how you perceive the women in your life and how much you treat them like human and as people who are worthy of respect intellectually, socially, relationally, and certainly physically as well.
Yeah. Tyler, I think one of the things, I've been a woman for a long time, and
congratulations.
Thank you. And I have two daughters, and so we have talked about this at least 5,000 times.
Modesty and grace.
Oh my gosh. Yep. It comes up all the time. And one of the things that I think is just really important that my husband and I both told our girls is we want you to dress modestly, not because of what it's going to do to a guy who you're around, but because you're a child of God and you are loved and you are valued and you should look like you're loved and valued. And so it's not about your relationship with men. It's about your relationship with God. And it doesn't mean that you have to be covered from head to toe. It just means that you, again, how you carry yourself is about the fact that you are a child of a king.
But wait, now you're not saying that Cardi B is less a child of God than anybody else.
No, thank you. That's not what I meant. But I'm saying that when you make your own clothing choices, knowing that that's in your head, then you can, it's a matter of dignity, I think, at least that's what I was trying to teach my girls. It's a matter of dignity for you, and you make your own choices. You're an individual. You can decide how much is too much or whatever, but it's because of your own dignity. It's not because you're trying to fit some man's perception or some man's perspective on what's good for you, because that's not for him. That's not for him to decide.
Right.
So I think if men understood that that's how this modesty culture makes women feel, I don't know, maybe I'm being too kind and generous about it, but I feel like men would get it if it was just explained a little more. Tyler, what do you say?
I think that's probably true, and I want to stress here, I don't have kids, so those conversations aren't ones that I've had to have. But I think that what I love about that approach and that conversation is what you're doing is you're starting with, you are a person of infinite value to God, and when you start with that as the root and the motivating force of the conversation, then you're not going to go too far wrong. That's a great place to start a conversation. It's hard to see how that could get really off track. And too often where these conversations starts is the implied message is your body is dangerous, the men around you are dangerous. Put those two things together and there's just going to be trouble. Better to try to satiate or solve all the problems in these guys' lives. And that's just not, that's a very self-defeating thing to teach women. It's a self-defeating thing to teach men too, because they're taught that there's really no victory here. They're always going to be a slave to their worst impulses. And I just don't think that's true.
Right. I mean, look, I talk about this a lot. I've got 5 sisters, and so a guy would come up to date my sister. He met my dad first, and my dad always said, "Hey, you're with my daughter. You're also with me." And there was kind of like a fear factor in there in some ways, And I think there's a respect built into that fear that they sort of go hand in hand because it is somebody's daughter, right? So you look at that and you kind of go, "I'm going to step up and be a gentleman here."
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember those. I don't miss those conversations that I had before I was married with the fathers of the girls I was dating, but I did have them, and it was always for the better.
Yeah, and you know what? Again, with every issue right now, it seems like we're being asked to be on one side or another, and that's
true.
Really frustrating. And this issue is one of a jillion I could name right now that are nuanced, right? And it requires a good conversation between men and women. It doesn't require people being on social media spouting off and saying, this is my viewpoint, and if you don't agree with it, then, you're wrong. Right. Because there is an element of recognizing that we are brothers and sisters together. And our goal as Christians is to care for one another, right? To be kind and merciful and just with each other. And so that might mean that a woman changes her outfit because of a particular guy. I'm not saying that should be prescriptive. I'm just saying that maybe that could happen every once in a while. I don't think it has to be, well, I don't give a crap about guys, or the other extreme where I'm modeling my whole outfit based on a guy. I think there can be something in the middle.
There is nuance, yeah. I mean, Tyler, so, you're married, and I'm sure you and your wife have this conversation, right? I mean, she's wearing what she wants to wear, but when you step out, you're looking good, but there's at the same time, there's an element of modesty to this. That's all.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's not I think that what's been helpful for me in my life, and I really credit this to my father and with my parents-in-law, is that that she has a lot of respect for herself, and that is a need, and that conversation was sort of handled, but well before I came into the picture, and so I would say that's where, although I don't have kids, I have seen the value in that sort of parenting that teaches a lot of respect for yourself, a lot of respect for your own body. And I'm a product of that kind of parenting too, like knowing that I do have control over my thought life and how I treat the people in my life, the women in my life. And that has paid off enormous dividends in this particular area.
Right. Sure. And so the bottom line is, if you were not raised this way, or if you did not have this conversation with people that you respected or were mentoring you or whatnot, then it doesn't enter into your head because society, culture is just so deeply over-sexualized.
It is.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it is hard, if you aren't raised this way. And I think to some extent we're all a little bit of a product of a culture that has a lot of negative ideas, bad ideas, toxic ideas about sexuality, about women. And that's going to take some work on all of our parts, some rededication of those parts of us that have been subjected to those things to God and to a biblical worldview. But it is doable. And if you're willing to put in the time and effort and discipline to realign your heart and your mind and your eyes to Jesus Christ, then what you're going to get out of it on the other end is just so rich and so rewarding. Your relationships are so much better and more fruitful because you're not worried about this potential time bomb in you in the same way that you are if you go and do these things.
Yeah. So it's not fear-based anymore. Now you can you can rejoice in the now.
That's good.
Well, Tyler, it's been super fun to meet you. We love Relevant.
Yeah,
and
we do love Relevant.
We've loved it for a long time. You want to tell our listeners about it?
Yeah, Relevant Magazine is, I've been senior editor here for about 3 years now, and we exist at the intersection of faith and culture. We try to cover cultural conversations, pop culture like music, movies, TV shows, books from a faith perspective. So some of our recent people we've talked to have been folks like Matthew McConaughey, Letitia Wright from Black Panther. Got a few more exciting things in the works that I can't talk about just yet, but I would love to see everybody listen to this over Relevant Magazine. Really excited about what we're doing right now.
Fabulous. Terrific. Great job. It's very well done. Tyler, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Tyler Huckabee from Relevant Magazine. Don't blame your lack of self-control on what she's wearing.